Om Shanti. Welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi. Our topic today is a peaceful diet, part 2. And as usual, we'll start with a reflection. Sitting comfortably, ensuring there's no tension in the body. With one thought, I enter my inner world. That vast space inside, where I process and experience what's going on around me. This is really where I live, in that inner world. When there is peace in my inner world, contentment, I don't take from the outer world. I'm not a consumer, but a bestower. But when I become empty inside, starving for that peace, that's when I start to take from the outer world. Seeking that peace, that contentment, seeking it in physical sources, sometimes even in physical food, trying to become full. What is the diet that will truly give me that peace, restore that inner peace and contentment? Om Shanti. Om Shanti, and welcome to those who just joined to Interview the Raj Yogi, Part 2, Peaceful Diet. So we have been exploring and also trying to differentiate the difference from a diet. You know, that's some are quite careful with their diet, and how this is a little bit more unique. We're looking at something much more subtle and invisible. So we talked a little bit about this aspect. Of course, it's Raja Yoga. So the aspect about me being a soul. What is the relationship between the more I move into that reality of being a soul and this aspect of a peaceful diet? I think one of the things we start to discover is that our sensitivities change when we are really deeply practicing what we call soul consciousness, the awareness of being a soul, a spiritual being. It actually starts to shift our sensitivities, or perhaps bring us back to sense. So what we crave starts to change. And I think we start to become aware that the sources we were looking to for satisfaction, contentment, fulfillment, we start to realize that it's not quite giving that which we seek. So we just start to shift what we find fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. This question kind of crossed my mind one time, probably because of being around individuals where it's a bit odd with the diet choices, where it'd be like, well, now you're just sensitive to everything. How does that help you in your situation?
In terms of souls who have food sensitivity, or
Just if you're so picky now at eating, like how is that helpful to you?
Well, it's funny. I wonder if it's a case of we weren't picky enough before, and now we're sort of coming to our senses. It's remarkable what we eat. If we walk through, I know there's been times, this is going to sound a bit strange, but I will walk into a grocery store and, it's filled with food, and yet I sometimes have left empty handed with the feeling there's nothing here to eat. And that sounds crazy. But just because suddenly, I think we've sort of gone to the other extreme of not being sensitive enough and really eating anything.
Yeah.
And perhaps it just needs to come into a bit of alignment.
I wonder then if we kind of like, in a sense, we lower our standards, but now on a deeper level, it's not just food, it's not just the vibrations in the food, but just anything that we think about, talk about, expose ourselves to.
Yeah, if I was to use an example that maybe won't be so sensitive, because I think food is a very sensitive topic, so I'm going to use a different example. We've noticed that in movement, so exercise, that when souls don't have what we call body awareness, the way they move or even sit or walk is actually quite hard on the body, whether it's the posture, whatever the case. And the body actually is crying out in pain, but we have become numb to it. So we continue to, I know during these past 16 months, there's been for many more sitting than usual to be in front of a computer. This is very hard on the body to sit for hours like that. It's crying out, but it's like we become numb or insensitive. And then the moment that they start to become aware again, move the body or have awareness, they suddenly, it's like, I can't do this. So they kind of start to come into line. So awareness is very powerful in changing our sensitivities. So becoming spiritually aware is a bit like aligning the self. And so it will change what we become sensitive to.
Do you know, Sarah, do you know if there's, I'm not sure if that's really something that souls would expect coming into a study like this. Like these are more suggestions, and I really appreciate it. It's like, see for yourself, experiment for yourself. This is only one aspect in terms of a diet, and it goes obviously so many different levels. If you've noticed that, can it be easy to sort of lose the point?
Yeah, we can sort of get caught up in the gesture and forget the message behind the gesture. So suddenly just obsessing about diet and sort of forgetting the reason that I am embracing the diet. And so I always feel it's wonderful when things happen naturally, when they're driven from the right place. So whether it's a change in my daily schedule, a change in my diet, whatever lifestyle change I'm looking at, it's really lovely if it's not an imposed rule, but rather something has shifted inside. So I'm open to that lifestyle change. It's actually naturally moving me towards that lifestyle change. Um, I think that's far more sustainable and far more nonviolent. So I know for me, coming into the practice, I was aware of the diet, the sativic diet, but I didn't dive into the deep end. I didn't. I just continued actually to consume a diet of spiritual knowledge, and it just sort of created a natural change over time.
Now, I hope this isn't really digressing, but it is a part of this aspect. And of course, it's more now on your personal experience. Would you say that prior to being in the study, that that was something you always recognized, that you wouldn't force yourself to do something, and you would really, that there would
Yeah,
be some understanding that would be required?
I think we're all rather forceful, period, with ourselves.
Maybe some more than
Yeah,
others.
but I came into this study attracted me because it asked us to operate, invited us, it allowed us, encouraged us to not be forceful. We have to be determined, we have to be disciplined, but it has to come from an authentic or honest place. It's just the very nature of what we're trying to become through this study. It doesn't, it's a bit like using war to attain peace. Although we do it, it doesn't make much sense. So if I want to become authentic, each step along the way is probably going to have to be authentic. So I really appreciate that about the study, is that it invited me to do it in a very meaningful way, whatever my pace is.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting with this aspect of a diet. It's such a sensitive topic. And do you find that whether it's about one certain diet, whether it's inside or like sort of more subtle, or even when it comes to a physical diet, that it starts to become something more, I'm not sure if the word easy, or maybe you've got a rhythm, but it just makes more sense as you continue along? Because there's some who are probably like not really sure, want to experiment, really want to progress, and may not really realize.
Mm. I remember hearing a story because whatever is motivating us is really helpful. So what's driving us, and a couple of souls that I know, they had been raised with a certain cultural diet that had a lot of dairy, a lot of oil, a lot of spicing, and then they both were they were in the same family. It was a mother and daughter. Were experiencing some quite serious health concerns, and they felt themselves that certain dietary changes could be helpful to alleviate those health concerns. So now they're very motivated to do this. And I think it involves removing salt, removing oil, removing those spices, removing dairy, so no butter. Um, and, people were looking at them, especially from a cultural perspective. It's like, is this even food that you're eating now? It had. I remember going to visit them, and they served me a meal. I'll never forget. They said, I know it's not, they keep salt for guests. And so they said, I know it's not well salted, so if you need to salt, it's okay. It's very respectful. Here's the salt. And I remember feeling that it was wonderful. The food was wonderful. And it was very tasty. It was very lovely. And there was a couple of things why. Obviously, one's headspace, that if you come into this saying, this is going to be horrible, then it probably will be. But also, I was very aware of the love with which they had prepared the food, so you could really taste that. Um, but also, it was very nutritious for the body. It actually was. Our food is over salted and over oiled. It was actually very nutritious on so many levels. It felt so nourishing, so
Mhm.
nourishing, and they were so healthy. So, but what fascinated me was how they got used to it,
Mm.
because they were open to getting used to it. Because of that motivation,
Yeah.
I want to be healthy. they were open to getting used to it. I know of people who are just absolutely dead set against certain dietary changes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no possibility to get used to it. So it really depends on what's motivating me. Am I strongly motivated for the sake of the self, for the health of the self, whether it's physically, emotionally, spiritually? When that's kind of that penny has dropped, the adjustment is far easier. And I, again, we sometimes in the study talk about I'm learning, and we actually say, no, you're unlearning. You're unlearning. You're returning to a natural state. So I say adjusting, but it's more of a returning to something very healthy.
Mm-hmm. I think Benny has something to share there. But let me ask a question and I'll go and take a quick peek. About just sort of bringing things back into a very broad perspective. What is the point of a peaceful diet in terms of the bigger perspective of what Raja Yoga is about? Because I think, as you were saying, that we can lose the point.
I think it's obviously we don't ever want to think that it's through this diet that my spiritual transformation will happen. But if I am, say, going into a surgery, there is the operation itself, the physical operation. I mean, that's the main thing. I would prefer that that operation happens in a very clean environment. I don't want it to be in the trenches or, in a place that isn't clean and free of bacteria. I want it to happen in a clean environment. Now, the clean environment is not doing the operation. There's the operation itself and then the environment in which it's happening. I want everything possible to support that operation. So that's why we embrace these lifestyle changes to support our spiritual transformation.
I think it's really helpful when you bring it to the bigger picture, especially because food is such a sensitive topic. Yeah. I don't know, we mentioned about it. It could have been the spiritual significance of physical sustenance. It's such a big piece. So if you haven't seen that session, you're welcome to check out the YouTube channel for the center. And we should have it under the Interview of the Raja Yogi playlist. So Benny has shared here, I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about. So true. In Raja Yoga, one of the things I have learned that has come from within. A change requires determination, willpower, discipline. If it is being imposed, then it won't last.
Yeah. So that's when we were talking about those two souls who embraced a change in their diet because it was motivated, to really benefit the health of the body. Absolutely. It's remarkable. I get to see that almost daily. Today I was with a group of souls doing a boot camp class, and I love, it's not necessarily the boot camp, but I love to see the soul wrapping their head around, having to really stretch themselves and it not be violent. And many people are shocked when I say, yes, a non-violent boot camp class, because it looks pretty, but it internally, if they have that kind of love and regard for the self, it's very nice when it's inspired from that place. And, when we think about someone like the first student, Brahma Baba, who, embraced incredible lifestyle changes, but there was no trace of violence. It was so gentle because it was driven from self-respect. I think that's the main thing. When we say soul consciousness, we're saying self-respect. And when there's a self, how does that change my sensitivities? What is the diet to feed self-respect?
Now, one of the things in this study, when we recognize that we're a soul, we're also acknowledging that there are previous births, previous experiences. And so sometimes maybe our endeavors with spirituality were not necessarily very healthy. Maybe it could have possibly been quite hard on ourselves. So, for someone who is coming into the study or would like to make some changes, and they may have had some habits in the past of forcing things to happen or feeling bad, what would your you have anything to share for such a soul? Because I feel you had a fortune of recognizing that you wouldn't rush yourself in this study.
I think it's always so good to really acknowledge the lay of the land. Um, I love it when souls say, usually I'm very violent with myself. And I think it's great when that's acknowledged and we
Mm.
can have a conversation about that. Um, just to make sure that it's, again, driven from a really sustainable, I know that was a word that Benny used, very sustainable place. Um, as I say, I think most of us are actually quite violent with ourselves in many ways. So, but it's really good to, and I think it's not just the sort of forceful way, forceful because we're kind of doing it blind, not just the forceful way we've gone at things, but also to acknowledge the resistance we're going to encounter. This gets very confusing for souls, which is why the self-respect is so important. We are going to encounter resistance. We're going to have a lot of determination, and that the idea that determination and discipline have somehow gotten mixed up with violence
Mm.
is a point of confusion for souls. But when you take those and they're attached to self-respect, it's not violent anymore. So again, souls would look at someone like Brahma Baba and feel, wow, he's really hard on himself. 4 hours of sleep. He's 93 years old. What's that? But the level, there was such a gentle vibration to that soul. When there is such deep, deep self respect, discipline has a very different feeling. So that's a key thing that needs to happen. And knowledge or understanding can help that to happen, to disconnect determination, discipline, willpower from violence, force, laboring, and connect it to something that's very peaceful, gentle, nonviolent, self respectful, because effort is a word that we have to develop a good understanding of. It's central to any
Yeah.
path of transformation, the word effort. So I really need to have a good conversation with myself about what does that mean, and to ensure that it's not violent, which it may have been in the past. Definitely, if one believes in previous births, definitely, I'll never forget, you know, I've talked before, driving by this church that had hundreds of steps, and knowing people had walked up those steps on their knees until their knees are bloody.
Mm.
So we've done some pretty intense things. We've starved ourselves perhaps to death, for spiritual, um, achievement, if you will. So yeah, it has to be acknowledged that this is different.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, would it be sustainable then?
No, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard on the soul.
Now, you've used that word sativic diet a couple times actually from last week as well. And I know this was a request from Benny about this aspect of food. It was actually very beautiful because and then we ended up having these different topics to just progress.
Mm-hmm.
So that it becomes much more, I guess you can say, significant and relevant of what this is all about.
Mm-hmm.
So this word sattvic, what does that mean? Because I'm not sure if necessarily everyone knows what that means.
So there's different qualities, if you will, um, of, in this case, of diet, connected to spirituality. And so there's sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. And it's just different quality of food. And it's not just the content of the food, but the vibration of the food, how it's prepared, how it's eaten. And they support different energies. So, for example, Rajasic food is quite popular amongst athletes. It's the type of food that creates, if you will, a restlessness or energizes. So athletes like often will, although this is changing a lot, I'm seeing much more and more athletes are figuring out they'll get better energy results with sattvic, but it tends to promote a restlessness, and tamasic promotes inertia. So this can include stale food, etc. Sattvic promotes peace. It promotes peace of mind. It's a very cooling, peaceful diet. And it's everything again from selection to preparation to absorption to eating it. So it's not just the content of the food, but the manner in which it's prepared and eaten. So it really is about supporting this peaceful endeavor, this endeavor to return to a state of inner peace. Very simple diet.
Now, this is sort of a broader aspect when you're sharing about how it's prepared, how it's cooked, and so forth. Food, as we mentioned, is a very, very sensitive topic. It is such a sensitive topic, it's actually politicized right now as well. And I know there's a lot out there in terms of how food, like where we get the food and what has happened to it. Does that become sort of a point of concern in terms of me, the soul, eating food?
I think it can actually get a little distracting. Because again, we're kind of losing the point or the thread. So we start to get into conversations about organic and vegan, and we kind of are into a political sphere as opposed to a spiritual sphere. So I always need to check back in. And again, genuinely, in that experience of being a soul, very, very peaceful being. Now, what would I want to put into the temple of this body? What would I want? So it's hopefully driven from that place. And then, quite frankly, if we're looking at vibration, none of the food now is really that great. It's got a lot of profit. So it's a very interesting topic. But I think we all ultimately, we are given the information and we kind of have to sort it out. But I think when we get caught up in the surface of it, we can easily lose the thread, the point.
Do you feel that when we think of ourselves as a body and what we consider to be valuable or means of change or means of progress is sort of why food is only one example where it just becomes a point of contention in terms of it's not really about, I hope souls don't take this offensively. Is it something deeper? Is it really about politics? Is it really about vegan? Is it really about, how many calories? Is it something deeper? And because we're not aware of ourselves as a soul, we can't really actually pinpoint what it is that we're really picky about.
Yeah, I think it's always, this is why I feel it might take a while to genuinely get into this, because I think it depends on a really good grounding in soul consciousness or openness to soul consciousness, so that it's really, I'm not doing it from the outside in. There's a lot of room for distraction in these different topics, but it's really coming from a feeling, and it's interesting. We talk about children as picky eaters, and they're not sitting there saying, I'm not going to eat that because it's not, made by this company. They just, no, it doesn't feel right. Right. So they're coming from that very pure state. Right. And that's what's determining what they do or don't like. So we're trying to get back to that very, pure hearted place of choosing from.
It's fascinating when you share that, especially because we use logic a lot because of this. But there does seem like there was a time when we just sensed what was right, and that sensing what was right was actually accurate. Like that's kind of hard to wrap our heads around it in a way. We've become so logical in a
Mm.
sense that may not necessarily really be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it again is coming from an intellectual or outside in place. One of the items, and I know this is very sensitive, so this might create some response or reaction, but one of the things about Rajasic diet is spicy food. It does excite. So to tell someone who has gotten very used to spicy food, okay, no more spicy food. This is I think that's going to be really difficult. But so it's much nicer to say, okay, I understand. I understand what you're saying. But I'm still really pulled to eat spicy food. And it's like, that's fine.
Mm.
Just keep practicing soul consciousness and see what happens. That's fine. Rather than, okay, no more spicy food. But I'm thinking about spicy food so much inside, you know, and I'm trying to work around it. And it's like, no, 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 no. Just keep practicing and just see what will happen naturally.
I think that kind of goes back to that question I was asking you for someone who might just be forcing themselves to
Yeah,
do something, but in their
exactly.
heart, like there's still a pull for something else.
Yeah, I think we recognize, it's a bit like someone who has any kind of addiction. I'm not saying spicy food's an addiction, but if we use that example, and they know the addiction may not be healthy, everything around them is they know it's not healthy. It could kill them. Um, but it's so challenging to stop. And it's a fascinating thing. What is going to make it possible in a sustainable way to to be liberated from that addiction? That's really what we're talking about, is we've become addicted to sources of, and not just in physical food, all sorts of forms of trying to fill a hole inside. And the things we're addicted to make the hole bigger, but we're addicted to them. So, what's going to have to happen to be able to be liberated from these things that are quite unhealthy for us?
Now, what I really, really appreciate being in the study is the spiritual lens. I really appreciate it so much. And I know that in science, there is this aspect of neuroplasticity. And they're trying to explain things in a scientific way. And I know, of course, it can be quite limiting. And I do find that being in the study, it just breaks things so wide open in terms of understanding in a sustainable way for change. So, in terms of, it's quite interesting. It's not that you learn something in school about this, but for souls who are addicted to things, they binge on whatever it is, and then they start to feel bad. What's going on in the soul? Is there something sort of subtle in the soul, the nature of the soul, that they would start to feel this heaviness?
I think, for any of us, it's such a, I mean, it really requires so much compassion because we are kind of addicted to things that are unhealthy for us. We can't seem to stop, but we know that they are unhealthy for us. So we feel guilty and bad about the thing. And this isn't just food. This is
No, it's
it can be
everything. Yeah.
anything. And so it's kind of ironic that, at least in this practice, we talk about mother and father, and mothers are always connected to food, cooking the food. So I'm using these terms in a very symbolic way, not just physical food. But I really appreciate that this study has not just the father, the different things that you need to do but the mother comes first. And the mother in this study is understanding. So understanding plays a very powerful role in being able to negotiate in an effective way through addictions, through change. So until there is that, we say, until there's realization, transformation is not possible. So I need to understand something. I need to realize it, see it, and then things start to happen in such a natural way. So, without trying to guilt our way into change, that's a really violent thing to do. I'd like to understand
Mm.
my way into change. So I am not a fan of pushing people to go quickly through anything, because everyone will understand at their own pace, at their perfect time. So I can't, or anyone can't make that. It was so funny because I remember one class. Again, this was a fitness class, and the souls, they're given exercises, and then they're moving down. Well, it was outside, so they're moving across the space on there, and they're going at their own tempo. And at the end of the class, the soul came up to me, and I was just saying, "Great that you came." And they said, "Well, I know I'm the last one in everything." I'm like,
It tends to be me.
and I said, "No, no, you weren't. No, because this soul just kept going. They just never quit. They just,
Mm.
they were wonderful. They were moving at their pace, but they got the benefits, right? So it really, this understanding and to respect that we all understand at our own pace, um, is super important. And then the
Mm.
change will happen very naturally.
I know we're running a little late, but we started very late in
Mm.
getting our little
Technology
technology.
arranged. Yeah.
But about it, it's such a sensitive topic, but it's something much deeper than what we think about. When it comes to just vibration, because this will actually be something we talk about a little bit later on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that being more and more sensitive then sort of limits you? I know we sort of touched on that earlier, but or is it more that because there's more and more self-respect
Mm.
in terms of a sense of who you are,
Mm.
then you really don't really feel like you're missing out on anything? Because I think what
Mm.
often happens, like, oh, I feel sorry for you. You've changed your
Mm.
diet. Are you eating enough?
Mm. Yeah. Um, there are two forms of renunciation. One form is where you're just losing things, you're giving up things, and this is really intense, and it's a very common form that's associated with spirituality, very ascetic. But then there's the other form of renunciation where you're actually, yes, I'm giving things up, but I'm getting something better. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually gaining, I'm attaining, I'm letting go of something harmful, really, in order to get something that's more beneficial. This is
Mm-hmm.
so. Yes, we definitely get that, sometimes of, wow, you sleep this much and you're eating this, and it's like, oh, but how much I am gaining, how
Mm-hmm.
much I receive. So I suppose the only proof at the end of the day is how peaceful and happy and benevolent one is. That's
Mm-hmm.
really the sign of whether or not I've attained anything. But yeah, there's not any sense of loss.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm reminded of that, event that I've spoken about before. So we will not belabor it, but this buffet, everything's free. It's one of the best, apparently, buffets in the town, and we, it was some company event, so there was the need to go. But the food that was prepared there wasn't really part of the diet I observed. So I knew it would not be possible. And so, but I think I went to get a glass of orange juice just, for the respect, I guess. And um, the soul who was at the table with me had piled their plate with everything possible, and they were going away eating it. And then they noticed I was just drinking the juice, and they looked at me and said, "Why are you not taking any of the food?" I said, "Oh, no, no, please enjoy. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm actually full." And they're like, "But it's free and there's all this food." I said, "No, no, no, I'm really good." And I genuinely did feel full. I felt no hunger, nothing, nothing. I was glad that they were happy, but there was absolutely no pull. It was kind of bizarre when you're surrounded by mountains of food and you have absolutely no interest in any of it. Now, the feeling was that I was consuming something, um, and it wasn't physical, if you will. What we desperately want is peace and happiness and contentment. What we desperately want is to fill up on that more than anything else. So if we're getting it direct, I mean, we want to put it into our food, but we also have a direct line to that. And there's many stories at the beginning of the organization. I don't want to frighten anyone. It was just what was happening culturally. Um, there was a lot of resistance, backlash. There was a lot of lack of understanding all around. And some of the young students, their families were very concerned. And they did certain things to try to get them to stop being engaged in this study. And one of them was no food, no water. It sounds extreme. But they were amazed that their daughters were not did not feel upset by any of this. They weren't even disturbed that they, so what the feeling was that their daughters were actually getting some sort of sustenance directly, what the soul needs, this peace, this love, this happiness. It's amazing how much we use food for love and for contentment and fulfillment. And so food is necessary for the body, absolutely. But giving the body, the highest quality of food, but also what do I, the soul, need to feel fulfilled?
I guess
That's
this
really
goes back to why a soul can keep eating and eating, consuming, and not really feel satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just it's all such a compassionate thing of we're trying to fill a hole inside. And yeah, we can come into conflict and argument, and it's very sensitive. But if we all sort of just agreed together, I know you're hungry, I know I'm hungry, we're trying to fill a hole inside that physical food probably can't fill. Once I figure out, then I want to put that vibration into my physical food. So I, the soul, get something too.
I know we're running out of time, but just one more question. Perhaps maybe it helps souls to sort of to understand what happens when being a soul becomes my reality. You had a lovely example, and you probably repeated it, but maybe in the context of this question of the I think it was like the owners of a magazine. And the changes they made, but sort of that parallel because of physicality, they had to make those changes. But if it felt like more and more my reality of being a soul, with those changes then make more sense.
Absolutely. Again, that deep realization that circumstances can afford, and it could be a crisis, which was the case for this couple. It could be a crisis.
Sorry, someone had cancer. Just so
no, sorry,
was it cancer?
It's a heart attack.
A heart attack. Yeah.
So it could be a crisis that forces me to look at things differently. Spirituality kind of is an inner crisis, I suppose. It awakens something inside that allows me to look at things differently.
Well, thank you for joining. I know
this has been quoted into an hour program.
You've been quoted.
Oh, no.
Understanding that we all understand our own pace. A legendary quote by Sister Judy.
No.
I wanted to acknowledge what you shared.
I am hoping that we are fulfilling Binny's wish, though, that she wanted sessions on food, and so I hope that we're fulfilling it.
We still have 2 sessions.
Yeah, so give feedback.
2 sessions. They're 2 parts. So our next session is about the spiritual preparation of food. And
maybe Nora will cook something in front of us.
This is an interview.
Oh, okay.
But I think that it kind of gives us some ideas of some things that might be helpful for souls on a practical level. So thank you for joining. Yes, we can have sattvic recipe shared. Yes,
Oh, good.
yes.
Yeah.
Especially the vibrations to inject into
Yeah.
it.
There is not that I'm doing a plug or anything, but there's that beautiful book. It's a recipe book, Pure and Simple. It's very nice. Yeah.
Maybe we can see if we can get some more here.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right, we'll transition to a little reflection because it feels like it's been an hour. Om Shanti.
The essence of a spiritual practice is to restore the well being of the self, to bring me into a healthy state. It has been said the sign of health is not measured in a physical way, it's measured by the degree of peace. When there's that deep inner peace that creates such contentment, I am completely full. And so I want to start to introduce into my day different ways, different sources of peace. The most powerful, of course, is the thoughts I feed my mind. Do I think in a peaceful way? Peace also can be attained through connecting to a source of peace, that one being who is ever peaceful, the Supreme Soul. And I can also bring peace into my physical world. Do I drive peacefully? Do I interact peacefully? Do I cook food and eat food peacefully, putting vibrations of peace into everything I do? That also is a source of peace for the self. Taking inventory in my life. Do I have sources of peace? The one thing I am most hungry for. Then that contentment will come, that sign of deep well-being. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you, JD, and thank you for those who are joining. I'm going to have to go back over there to the IT, and someone's going to have to share what upcoming sessions we have. As well, we still have one more weekend in June. Shanti.
Om Shanti. I know this weekend, I believe it's the 27th, Sunday at 5 o'clock to 6:15 on Zoom, YouTube, Instagram, everybody. I don't know. Zoom and YouTube. There will be a session on inner stability. So you're welcome to join that. Again, the information is on our website this Sunday, June 27th at 5 o'clock p.m., and that's Calgary time. Inner stability. And we also have inner fitness every Saturday, 2 to 3 on the Zoom platform. And we also have self-care, and that's hosted by the Young Adults of Canada, Young Yogis of Calgary. So that's 4 to 5. And that's on the YouTube platform. So again, this is all on our website. And I don't know, there's evening meditations. Is there anything else that? Yeah, and hopefully we'll have the July schedule available for you soon. But thank you so much, and we appreciate any feedback. Um, the reason I look at this isn't because I'm ignoring you, but this is how we're watching what's going on Instagram. So feel free if there's any feedback you want to give. Very helpful. I think that's it. So we'll just have a moment to digest all of this. Om Shanti.